Hey guys, what's up? It's Jenna. I am so glad you're joining us for Belin Youth Group at Home edition. It is summer, it's July, and we are kicking off a series called This or That. This or That. And I am so glad you're joining us. And I would guess that you have already learned in school about measuring systems. You might know that in Europe, they use a different kind of system called the metric system than we use here in the United States. The metric system uses things like meters, liters, things that we don't really use, grams, where we in the US, we use things like inches, feet, miles, pounds to talk about things like weight or distance, where it's different with the metric system. So a couple days ago, I went to weigh my little baby who was almost 3 weeks old at the time, and he was 5 kilograms. Yeah, 5 kilograms. That meant absolutely nothing to me because that was in the metric system. And so when you convert it to what we use or what I would be accustomed to, he is 11 pounds. So yeah, that is a big baby by comparison for a 3-week-old, right? And so, we have different standards of measurements, and, whether we use various things to determine how much flour to put in cake, or we debate what kinds of meters or feet or miles to use to determine how far our friend's house is. One of the things that is a standard of measurement that we all use, whether we recognize it or not, or want to admit it or not, is comparison. Comparison is basically something many of us are very familiar with. It's just recognizing and looking at somebody's something and comparing it to another. Typically, we look at somebody else's this and compare it to another that. But usually, the this is somebody else's and that we're comparing to our something, right? So we have this tendency to compare our things to somebody else's things. So, for example, you might think your pair of sneakers are really awesome until you see the pair of sneakers your friends just got. Or you might think the grade that you got on the test was pretty good, and then you saw your friend's grade that was even better. Or you might think that the grade that you got on the test was pretty bad, and then you learned that only 3 people passed the test. By comparison, we can determine, or do determine really, where we rank, right? And see, that is the danger. Comparison is a way we measure our lives against somebody else's. And the problem is it leads us to believe things that just aren't true or accurate. So, for example, you see your friend has like 500 followers on Instagram, and you just think, wow, that person's so popular. You see pictures of their family that looks like they have it all together, and you think that their family is so much better than yours, and you'd rather be a part of theirs. You see people who get all A's and just think they have the best life ever. And you see friends who have all of these other friends, and you just can't even imagine having that many friends, and their life just seems so perfect. And the reality is that nobody's life is perfect. Nobody's life is like it is on Instagram or Snapchat. So then not only are we in this place where we're believing things that aren't true, we're in a place that feels like we will never measure up. And we get this sense, and maybe this sense of disappointment, like, man, I want to have what so-and-so has, right? Ever order something and think you ordered something awesome, and then your friend's food comes and you want that instead because it just seems like it's better, right? It's that sense of disappointment. Or you might be really frustrated, like frustrated, like, why me? Why not me? Why can't I have what they have? You might also not just be frustrated, but you might get the sense of hopelessness. Like, not only does so-and-so have everything, like everything I want, but I'm never going to be able to have that. And you get this sense of defeat and this sad feeling inside that, like, I'm never going to be able to have those things. And you want those things, and don't you deserve those things? Maybe you actually are very motivated by a comparison. Like, you see what somebody else has and you want that, and you work really hard and you're determined. And hard work and determination are not bad things, but they can be a very unhealthy sense of motivation. It can come from a really unhealthy place. The other thing that comparison can do is you might compare yourself and feel really good about yourself when you compare yourself to others, which also isn't healthy. You think you're better than someone because you compare yourself to what other people do. And it might be people who mess up in their lives or have a mistake, or you feel so much superior because you were faster at your meet, or you made more shots, or you got a better grade, or you feel like you have a better boyfriend, and so you therefore conclude that you're better than everyone else. And that's a really unhealthy place to come from too. Regardless of how comparison makes you feel, it never really gets you anywhere. And here's what I mean by that. When we compare ourselves and we say, hey, I want to have that thing, and you attain that thing, you're just move on to the next comparison. It like never really fulfills you. So, for example, one example is lifestyle inflation, particularly when it comes to housing. So maybe you lived in an apartment and you get a nice house and you feel like, hey, if I could just get in that house, I'd be great. And you're in there, but now all of a sudden that's not enough, and you move on to the next thing and the next bigger house. You want bigger and better. People do that with cars. People do that with clothes. People do that with friends. And it's like whatever you have just doesn't feel like enough. Like you don't have that sense of fulfillment. So you don't have that sense of fulfillment, and it never really gets you anywhere. And comparison's like this cycle, and it's so hard to get out of it. And if you're like me, you must be thinking like there's got to be a better way. And the good news is there is a better way. There is a better way to stop this cycle of comparison. And we're going to talk about that more today. We're going to look at a story from Corinth. Paul is an amazing apostle writing to the people of Corinth, and he addresses people who are talking about comparison. And this is what he says. Oh, don't worry. We wouldn't dare say that we are as wonderful as these other men who tell you how important they are, but they are only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as the standard of measurement. How ignorant. Even though Paul was specifically talking about some false teachers who were bragging about their spirituality, the same truth applies to us today. Basically, Paul was saying, listen, comparing yourselves to other people, it stinks. It's not great. It's not good. It doesn't get us anywhere. So let's not do it, okay? And that's basically where Paul is coming from. And why is Paul telling the people of Corinth this? Well, basically, what I think Paul wants the people at Corinth to know, what he'd want us to know today, is that when we measure ourselves against other people, we are using the wrong standard of measurement. When we hold our real life up to someone else's life on social media, when we compare the way our family looks to the way another person's family looks, when we look at what we have in comparison to what someone else has, well, we will always end up on the losing end. And that's because we're looking in the wrong place. And I know that to be true, not just because how comparison makes us feel, but because of something else that Paul wrote in this very letter. Let's take a look. When people commend or compliment and praise themselves, it doesn't count for much. The important thing is for the Lord to commend them. I'm going to repeat that. The important thing is for the Lord to commend them. It's not about how we measure up in comparison to other people. It's not about how our this compares to their that. As Paul said, that doesn't account for much. What does matter, what is really important, is how God commends us, right? And here is what I really want you to hear today. God doesn't compare you to other people. Can you take that in for a moment? When I hear that, it is such a great reminder for me. God does not compare you to other people. God is not there putting you up in a list and ranking you by how athletic you are or how intelligent you are. He's not there looking at you in comparison to everyone else in your school of how you rank academically, determining your intelligence. He doesn't look at you that way. God is not comparing you to other people. No, rather, I know that is true because of what happened when Jesus came on the scene. You see, Jesus came on the scene and he turned everyone's view of people upside down. Jesus viewed people differently than we view ourselves. When Jesus came, he didn't sit there and rank everyone from best to worst. He didn't even compare them to his own perfection. No, he looked at everyone in light of God's love. God's love was his standard of measurement. And he loved all people. And he determined that all people had value and worth. We all have value and worth. You see, God isn't using everyone around you as some kind of measuring stick to determine your value or your worth. Why are we? Instead, God just looks at you through his eyes. And God sees your value and your worth through his love for you. God doesn't compare you to others. Then what can we do to stop comparing ourselves? There's some more truth in Proverbs I want you to take a look at. It says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Comparison starts in our hearts. Comparison is a habit that we have. It is an impulse that we have to look at ours this and compare it to somebody else's that. So what I'd love you to do is pay attention to your feelings. Notice the way your mood or outlook changes when you start to compare yourself to someone else. Do you feel disappointed, frustrated, angry, anxious? And then also think about what's fueling it. Is it maybe a TV show you watch? Are you fueled by the sport you participate in to compare yourself to other people? Is it academics? Is it this idea of success you have in your mind? Maybe your idea of success needs to be altered a little bit. Is it pressure that you feel at home? Is it an insecurity that you have? What is fueling your comparison to others? And then also think about what you do have. So celebrate what you do have. And look, I know hearing maybe like be thankful for what you have seems pretty cliche, and a lot of people tell you to do that. And there's good reason. Celebration is an incredible discipline, and one that I personally feel is overlooked a lot. Celebrate who you are. Celebrate who God made you to be. Make a list of all of the spiritual gifts you have, all the talents that you have, and celebrate the things that make you you and what you do have. Then when you're tempted to compare, you can fill your heart with gratitude and remember that God doesn't compare you to others. If you're sitting here thinking that you are the only person who deals with struggling with comparison, you are not alone. Every single one of us in some area of our lives struggles with comparison, but we don't have to. God doesn't compare us to others. And why do we? We do not have to. Let's view ourselves the way God sees us. You have value and you have worth. I'm so glad you joined us today for Youth Group at Home Edition. You're awesome, and I will see you real soon.